Okay, welcome back to Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. I'm your host, John Strazicich, and today we'll be continuing on in our series here in the book of Jude, and we will be looking here primarily at just verses 5 to 10 here. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and open them up to the book of Jude. Okay, now coming then here to this particular slide, we'll begin here with the translation of the text here in verse 5, and then we'll come to some type of structural analysis, at least here for verses 5 to 7. And so we'll begin here in verse 5. Now, I desire to remind you, although you have known all things once for all, that Jesus, after having saved a people from the land of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe, and angels who did not keep their own domain, but left their own habitation, he has kept in eternal bonds under gloom for the judgment of the great day. As Sodom and Gommorah and the cities about them, in like manner to these, went a whoring forth and departed after different flesh. They have set themselves up an example by undergoing punishment of eternal fire. Likewise also these dreamers. On the one hand, they defile the flesh, and on the other hand, they reject authority, and they blaspheme glorious ones. Now, Michael, the archangel, when disputing with the devil, he began to argue about the body of Moses. He did not dare bring a judgment of blasphemy, but said, "May the Lord rebuke you." Now these, on the one hand, blaspheme what they do not know, and on the other hand, what things they know, they understand naturally as brute beasts. By these things they corrupt themselves. Okay, so now coming here then to our structure. This begins, point B here within the body of the letter. And so last time we looked at point A, which was the occasion and basis for the letter. So now we're beginning here, which I entitled the call for remembrance of pre-written and pre-spoken oracles of judgment with typological Midrashic applications. So there's going to be a total of four, there are four calls to remembrance, each one coming with, underneath the first point, there are three that are pre-written, and then secondly, there is a last one that is pre-spoken oracles, and that's by the apostles, and that will be in verses 17 to 19. But the first point here are all the ones that are pre-written oracles, and so just today we're looking at the very first one, and it's a group oracle of judgment, and it's talking about different groups, and within these groups there are three of them that are identified here under double alpha, double beta, and gamma. And the first one here is with the unbelieving Israelites at the Exodus generation. The second one are disobedient, rebellious angels that fell, most likely referring back to Genesis 6. And then here, the example of the group of cities of Sodom, Gommorah, Admah, Zeboim, etc., that were destroyed at the time of Abraham, and then it also it comes with a typological Midrashic application to the infiltrators in verses 8 to 10. So just the group examples. This covers 5 to 7, so the first one, goes from 5 to 10 here, and that is both the group example with the Midrashic application to the intruders. And so pretty much this here itemizes what's taking place just within the group, and then beta down here, we'll have to get to that in a later slide, and then we'll fill out more information on what's going on there in verses 8 to 10. But anyhow, this is our translation and a little bit of structure. Okay, now coming here then to this particular slide, what we're going to take up here is the idea of something that scholars refer to as a disclosure formula, and here in our text, it's this phrase here. Now, I desire to remind you that. And then as you go forward, then the disclosure is made. And we have several examples here that we can reproduce from the New Testament here. Like, let's look down here in Romans 1:3. They come in a little various styles, but they all end up with a haughty clause. Or we can even have a hina clause, but it's these either haughty or hina here, then are introduces either direct or indirect speech, or some content of some type of knowledge that is going to be imparted. So let's look here at Romans. Now, I do not desire you to be ignorant, brethren, that oftentimes I purposed to come to you, and was hindered unto now, in order that I may share some fruit amongst you, just as also amongst the rest of the Gentiles. So you can see here, I do not desire you to be ignorant, brethren, that. Okay, so then that after the word that here, then it this is the content of the indirect speech. Now in Romans here, again in 11:25, I do not desire you to be ignorant, brethren, and we'll say concerning this mystery that, and then it goes into the content of the speech. But we're looking here at the formulaic disclosure formula, and it typically comes in, I do not desire you to be ignorant, and he says this again. We'll look at Corinthians, I do not desire you to be ignorant, brethren, that. And then it goes into, indirect speech. And another way, now concerning spiritual things, brethren, I do not desire you to be ignorant. So this is some type of, it's a disclosure formula. It's a formulaic way of, prefacing something that is going to then be quoted, whether indirectly or directly. And so we see this here, how Jude then uses this type of formulaic speech. He says, now I desire to remind you. And then attached to this, typically this comes in a genitive absolute. Here we have an accusative absolute. Because the participle here is in the accusative. But anyhow, so this does take on some type of adverbial use, and we'll say this is concessive. It could be you could understand this also as causal, in a different way, but most I think the easiest way to understand it is concessively. Although you have known all things once for all, and then then we're going to come up here to that, and then it introduces the indirect speech. But anyhow, I just wanted to, this slide here just is going to offer up some type of diagrammatical analysis, and offer some type of understanding of the text as we have it. So anyhow, so we'll move on. Okay, then coming here then to this particular slide, we'll continue here. So we have this haughty clause here. Now, this is haughty here is being used as introducing narrative content, or either by way of direct or indirect speech. So which it completes or supplements the idea here, or complements the idea that of the disclosure formula. So this is the actual content of the disclosure that begins here. And so when we do here, we have in the 28th edition of the Nestle text, we have Jesus here, and other manuscripts are going to have kurios here. And so this is a text critical issue here, and it looks like the way that the textual criticism, or the latest text critics here are putting in Jesus here, because it would create the most difficult reading, and it would be the reading that would give rise to other readings that would try to somehow eliminate the difficulty, because this one here, we're assuming here that Jude originally used Jesus here. Other manuscripts put in kurios, and so you're going to have this within whatever text you're using. It's going to either have kurios or Jesus here, and according to I guess some of the I guess the newer method here of the coherence, based genealogical method that's taking place over there in Münster, Germany, and also along with the ECM. This is the I guess it would just be the critical majority edition here, and I think they're looking at basically the principal manuscript traditions of the first millennia, plus patristics, and they're using the coherence-based genealogical method, which seems to be maybe it's the newest way of that text criticism is moving forward, and I think it's going to be fruitful. But anyhow, I don't know if we want to get all necessarily into text criticism here. It's either going to be Lord or Jesus, but here it offers that Jesus is the one who's destroying the unbelieving Israelites after having saved the people out of Egypt, and Jesus is also the one responsible for detaining the angels for the day of judgment that had left their own habitation. So this is the text that's presented to us, and so we have this initially here we have this bifurcated compound sentence here, and the very first two examples of group examples come here to us in this text, and so we'll just continue on, and we'll say here, and Jesus, after having saved the people from the land of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe. So here, this is sosos. This is it's an adverbial participle. That's temporal in nature. So, after having saved, it would be the best way to translate this, to grab the full weight of what is being said here. So, after having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, subsequently here, he destroyed those who did not believe. And then we have te here, and so he's combining this in a compound sentence. And it continues on here, and the angels who did not keep their own domain but left their habitation, he has kept. And then we'll come down here. He has kept in eternal bonds under gloom for the day, or the great, for the judgment of the great day. So this is how we're to understand the text here. Diagrammatically, how it would be mapped out according to syntax and grammar. And you can see here that by doing this, you can actually get point 1 and point 2 here very easily by doing this. So diagrammatical analysis does help in understanding the text, in isolating each part, and then assigning to each word the function within the text. Okay, then coming here then to this text, you can look here at Robert Plummer and in his ongoing works here with Greek grammar. And he offers in his textbooks here text critical criteria. There's external criteria, internal criteria. And basically, it's the basic criteria for establishing the most responsible reading that we can come to. So that's our goal here, is to provide the most responsible reading that we have with the available tools and manuscripts that we have. And you can see more of this by looking into Dr. Plummer's works. Okay, so let's kind of jump back into our text here, and I do want to look at Dr. Green here in this disclosure formula, and this is going over the first of the. There's 3 groups here that our author then is going to cover. Before he offers his Midrashic application, that will that these groups will then will offer support in their condemnation. So he's picking out here the rebellious people out of Israel. So looking at this, here at the disclosure content, Jesus, after having saved the people out of the land of Egypt, subsequently destroyed those who did not believe. This stress, he says, this stress serves as a link to Jude's declaration of the gospel as God's final revelation, and at the same time sets up the contrast between the deliverance through the Exodus and the subsequent judgment. Those who were once and for all delivered could not suppose that they were immune from judgment, since the errorists had claimed that grace allowed them to participate in sexual immorality. They would also consider themselves to be immune from judgment. Salvation, despite being the powerful work of God, does not exempt people from judgment if they embrace sin. Jude apparently considers the opponents to be apostates from the faith. So this is very important. You may not like this, but we're going to continue on with the parade. Okay, then coming here to Richard Bauckham, ta deuteron on a second occasion is hard to explain with precision. It's more likely that Jude intends to distinguish the first occasion on which God acted to save his people at the Exodus and a second occasion on which he acted to judge their disbelief. In that case, the point of ta deuteron is to emphasize that this is an act of judgment on apostasy. The people whom the Lord had saved were not thereby immune from subsequent judgment. Applied to the antitypes, Jude means that the first occasion on which the Lord acted in relation to Christians to save them will be followed by a second occasion, the parousia, when he will judge apostate Christians. And so says Bauckham here. And I think this is important here, because that's exactly what he's doing with this language, especially using the temporal, aorist participle here, sosos, after having saved the people from the land of Egypt. Subsequently, he destroyed those who did not believe. So that sets up the contrast and how then we are to then understand this as it's going to be applied to the apostates. But before we export the meaning to the apostates, you have to first import it to yourself. Okay, then coming here to David's, what I meant there by importing it to yourself is just examining yourself. That's important. We're all, as Paul commands us, that we are to examine to see if we're in the faith. Okay, that's 2 Corinthians 13. You can go look that up. But continuing here on this topic here, let's see what Peter Davids has to say. What then is Jude saying? After politely introducing this section of argumentation, he points out to his readers as his first piece of evidence that while the Lord on the one hand delivered the whole nation out of Egypt, he also destroyed in the wilderness those who did not believe. That is, they were not those who were not committed to him and those who did not trust in him. The issue is not intellectual belief, but trust and commitment. This situation parallels that of the interlopers who are showing unfaith in that they are denying Jesus Christ, our only sovereign and Lord. Thus, the implication is that although they are among the people of God whom the Lord has saved out of Egypt, they will be destroyed in the end because of their lack of commitment, that is, of faith in the Lord. So I think here that David's captures the meaning of the text. And remember here, folks, we don't, I'm not committed to a certain type of theology. I'm just, whatever the text plainly means, I adopt it. So this here is, obviously, I'm not somebody big on once saved, always saved, and I'm sorry to tell you, I'm definitely not a Calvinist. Okay, I'm just simply because the text here, would the inference of this text would be that. I mean, this would not be a text to go to try to prove, one of these doctrines or disprove it, but it certainly doesn't help it. Okay, then moving along in our text here, what this slide here is just going to produce here for us is we're talking now about the angels who had sinned and who did not keep their own domain but left their own habitation. And the text said that he kept in eternal bonds under gloom for the judgment of the great day. Okay, so then, Kistemacher here, then he's going to produce here from First Enoch. And the reason why, this is stated in a lot of different texts, like in Jubilees or in Second Baruch, or in CD from Qumran, the Damascus document. And then the reason why I think that scholars are going to go to First Enoch is because Jude ends up quoting First Enoch there in verse 16. So since we already know he's fishing in First Enoch, we'll just whatever other allusions here that could be taken, we'll just assume that Enoch would be probably a primary text that he's using this allusion to. Now, we don't have an actual biblical text that is going to refer to this. This is referring to basically well-known, documented sources from the intertestamental period. Or some could assume, that some of these works could be canonical from the viewpoint of Jude himself, and I would leave that particular opinion open, and I definitely would not. Say that's not a possibility here, but typically most of us don't have First Enoch in our canon, but anyhow, he is definitely referring to textual evidence that we can find here that he's referring to, and this is all pre-written material that he spoke, that he told us that these were written of long ago. So what do we do know that has been written? Well, let's look at First Enoch. The angels, or we could say the watchers, have abandoned the high heaven, the holy eternal place, bind Azael hand and foot and throw him into the darkness, that he may be sent into the fire on the great day of judgment. And this is going to then somewhat parallel our text here for sure. And so Kistemacher says down here, the writer of First Enoch presents a commentary on Genesis 6:1-4 and explains that the angels fell into sin committing adultery with women. He writes that these angels corrupted the human race and received God's condemnation. They were put in prison and were bound forever. God destroyed the corrupt human race of Noah's day with the waters of the flood. And I put down here that a parallel text to this is obviously in 2 Peter, where it says, "For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but having committed to Tartarus in bonds of gloom, he has kept for judgment." So this here, this text here from 2 Peter, then immediately 2 Peter then goes into the sin of Sodom and Gommorah, which is identical to what Jude does here. So it seems like Peter then is alluding here to the same thing that Jude is alluding to. And if you go back and look at like some of the other authors like Gene Green, you can also even take this back to 1 Peter chapter 3, okay, talking about the spirits which are now in prison. So Gene's going to apply that text as well here. So this, I'm just introducing this here to you, that since this tradition, we can't, Jude's alluding to textual material that was pre-written beforehand, and he takes up the account of Unbelieving Israel, which probably is going to go take us back, obviously, then to Numbers 14, there at the incident at Kadesh Barnea. That's 13 and 14 of Numbers. You can find that all there. But in this instance, then we have to. This lies outside of the Bible. So this is why people and Jude's definitely referring to pre-written sources here, because that's what he claimed, back in verse 4, about these intruders, that they were, their condemnation has been written about long ago. This is a text that was written previously, previous to Jude. So anyhow, this is just this is where this is what this is most likely referring to, okay, and Jude assumes that his audience is very familiar with this, or he would not have reproduced this. So this is important, and you need to expand your thinking here, so that you're in the same, you're on the same page with Jude and his readers. Okay, then continuing on in our exegesis here, looking at this clause here, diagrammatically, we have this host clause of comparison here. So this is going to offer us our third grouping. So we already looked at the unbelieving Israelites. We just got done looking at the rebellious angels. Now we're looking at the sinful nature of the cities of Sodom and Gommorah. Okay, and so the text says, as Sodom and Gommorah and the cities around about them, in like manner to these. So, to these is going to most, number one is going to go back here and going to refer to the angels. Okay. Why? Because we're gonna follow, this fourth, who went a-whoring and departed after different flesh. Well, the angels who, this is referring then to these angels that were a part of the host of heaven. They came down and they had sexual relations with different flesh. Okay, so this is referring to, they're probably, this is referring to that they had, came down and corrupted the human race with the hybrid type that produced these, these giants, okay, the Nephilim. And this is pretty much what this text presupposes, okay, so that these angels who did not keep their own domain but left them, and so what did they do? Well, in this, this is definitely a introducing a comparative clause, and so we do know that Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, there's such things called Sodomites. Okay, that you could refer to it, as within the grouping of lesbo, homo, hedonica, and which this is talking about homosexuality. And this whole thing here about different flesh, because Sodom and Gomorrah, what's different flesh? Well, it would be, the normal flesh would be, that God created Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. Okay, and so different flesh would be that men then would burn in their desire towards one another, and not to the natural union of male and female. Okay, that Paul established that in Romans 1. Okay, and so and this is we're just this is what the text is definitely wanting us to understand here, like it or not. I at one time didn't really subscribe to this. This interpretation of Genesis 6. But, hey, after being very honest with myself with Jude, a long time ago, I just said, well, no, this is definitely kind of the better of the interpretations that would offer, weight for this type of interpretation. So I have subscribed to this. Now, coming then here to this middle use here of this present participle, they have set themselves up an example by undergoing the punishment of eternal judgment here. So then this particular participle here being used adverbially, and we would definitely say the best function would be means by undergoing the judgment of eternal fire. But they've set themselves up. That is Sodom and Gommorah and the surrounding cities, okay? They have set themselves up an example by undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. So for those following that people should not participate in the sins of the Sodomites, okay, and this is talking about sexual sins, all right, because we do know from the account there when the in Genesis 19, or I think somewhere around there, where the angels come to the city of Sodom, and they were there to deliver Lot, that when the angels struck the men who were trying to break into Lot's house, they wanted to have sexual relations with these angels, okay. And so that definitely, this is talking about homosexuality. We're not going to make any, we're not caving to, the zeitgeist of today. The Bible condemns this type of, sexual perversion. And marriages between a man and a woman. Okay, now coming then here to this slide here, we're going to get into the typological Midrashic application to the infiltrators in verses 8 to 10. Coming down here to verse 8, it says, "But these dreamers also likewise on the one hand defile the flesh, and on the other hand reject authority. And they blaspheme glorious ones. Now, Michael the archangel, when disputing with the devil, he began to argue about the body of Moses. He did not dare bring a judgment or a charge of blasphemy, but said, 'May the Lord rebuke you.' Now, these blaspheme whatever things they do not know, but whatever things they understand naturally as unreasoning animals or as brute beasts, by these very things, or by these things, they corrupt themselves." Okay, so what's going on here is it starts off here in Roman numeral 1 here in small caps. It says 3 typological Midrashic comparisons between the intruders and the scriptural references, the prior scriptural references. They defile the flesh, they reject authority, and they blaspheme celestial beings. So as far as like defiling the flesh, then this is going to then equate to, what's going on with Sodom and Gommorah. Not necessarily that they have to be, homosexuals, but they're sexually amoral people, and so it just simply says they defile the flesh. And secondly, they, under double beta, they reject authority. So this is they're rejecting divine authority. of how they're supposed to act in life, and to respect God's authority, about how they are to, act as, children of God, and they've clearly chosen to act as brute beasts. We understand that from verse 10, and it says that they blaspheme celestial beings, which would be here, when they blaspheme glorious ones. So this definitely is going to refer to angelic beings. And so that's why, Jude in verse 9, he rallies to support this last claim here, and he brings up the example from intertestamental literature that we know from the church fathers and from certain scholia. Scholia are like notes that are written in the side margins of manuscripts, that he's referring here to a document called the Assumption of Moses. And in Exodus, in Deuteronomy 34, it just talks about God burying the body of Moses. But here he's talking about Michael, and there's some big dispute with the devil. I mean, this isn't, verse 9 is not found anywhere in the Old Testament canon itself, but it's found outside of it. And so so it's important to understand. This is why people say that, Jude's using this, and he's using this as, as part of the, pre-written, scriptural, writings about how these people are deserving of judgment. And so this here is, he's using this to support his argument here. And this comes from a pre-written, authoritative text. It's functioning here in Jude this way. So this is why, some people, Jude's canon may be a little bit different than ours. We'll just leave it there. But anyhow, so he takes up this account that is known to exist in the Assumption of Moses, where Michael, is arguing over the body of Moses. And the argument there in the Assumption was that, he had killed this Egyptian guy, and therefore the devil had a right to then, to have authority over his burial. And and I guess God didn't want to have any part of that, because they probably were going to, deify Moses. The Israelites, they would begin to worship Moses as some type of divine figure. So God just, made sure that no one ever found his grave. But the devil wanted to exploit that. So anyhow, we have to talk about this because it's not found in the biblical text. So if you're reading this, you're going, wow, I never remembered that. Well, it's because, you never read it. Okay. It's found outside of the text. But it is a pre-written authoritative source that Jude is using to support his claim that they blaspheme celestial ones. So this here is, is functioning as collaborating support for the accusation of blasphemy. That's how you're to understand the function of verse 9. And then when we come here to 10, now these, on the one hand, blaspheme what they do not know. That's kind of going back and referring here then to, showing, how they are unlike Michael, because Michael then, when he disputed with the devil, he did so in a fashion where he did not blaspheme Satan, but he respected him, and just said, "May the Lord rebuke you." So he didn't get extracurricular in his words that he spoke to Satan. He was very careful not to blaspheme the devil, because Satan's probably a whole lot more was a type of angelic creature that had way more authority and power than Michael did. Not to say that Michael's some weakling, but the devil is is somebody you don't want to really mess with. Okay, on your own. Okay, you can only come in God's name. So now then, coming here then to 10, when it says, now these blaspheme such things as they do not know. So they're blaspheming, spiritual authorities that they really don't understand, and it says, but things, such things as they understand naturally or instinctively as unreasoning animals or brute beasts, by these things, these very things, they corrupt themselves. So, this refers back here to the Hassa clause here that we saw beginning here, right here, the first Hassa here. On the now these blaspheme such things, right? Hassa, such things they do not know, but such things, Hassa again, they understand naturally as brute beasts. By these things they corrupt themselves. So that's what, by these things here, it's referring back to this Hassa clause where they defile themselves in two ways. One is spiritually, okay, because they're blaspheming, angelic authorities, whether good or bad, and then two, they're corrupting themselves by their base, their base hormones, okay, their hormonal animalistic nature, okay. So as they're led as brute beasts by their hormones in defiling their own flesh, by corrupting it sexually, then this is how they are, they're corrupting themselves. It's by these very things. And so with this, comes to, his first example here of using this Midrashic application to the infiltrators. He takes up these examples here. But it's important to understand that verse 9 is its functioning is collaborating support by way of allusion to the accusation of blasphemy that was made here in verse 8 underneath. They're blaspheming celestial beings, glorious ones. Okay, and so this gave us understanding into what he was thinking, and then he ends off here with this further it's correlating explanation for the charge of blasphemy, and then so by these things here he's showing us the utter corruption of these infiltrators, and that they're not spiritual people. They're actually acting on their base nature, which is definitely corrupt. Okay, then coming here then to Richard Bauckham, it's important that we spend a little time here on this particular slide, so that you would correctly understand how to understand the function of verse 9 here within the argument. So he says here, verse 9 is a free quotation from the Testament of Moses, which is linked back to verse 8 and forward to 10 by the catch words blasphemusin / blasphemias, they slander and slander. But this does not mean that verses 9 to 10 are an independent section comprising of text and interpretation. Rather, verse 9 is a secondary quotation introduced in the course of the interpretation of the types of verses 5 to 7. This is shown by the fact that verse 9 does not supply a type or prophecy of the false teachers, but an example with which they are contrasted. That's important. And then look down here. The structure of this section is therefore citation in verses 5 to 7, followed by interpretation 8 and 10, with a secondary quotation 9 introduced to help the interpretation. This introduction of a secondary quotation in the course of the exegesis can be found occasionally in the Qumran Pesherim. So says Bauckham, and I think he's right here, and I think that this is the way to best understand this unit that starts at verse 5 and then ends at verse 11. Okay, then looking here at verse 8 diagrammatically, we're going to start up here, with our standard here, mentoi. So this is a conjunction here, and it's a coordinating conjunction, and it's been reduced to a but here. And so our sentence begins with, but these dreamers also likewise defile the flesh on the one hand, and on the other they reject authority, and they blaspheme glorious ones. So we have here hutoi then, these, this becomes our subject, and then it's modified here by a adjectival participle here, dreamers, that is a passive, and then we have this adverb here that is going to then modify each of our verbs here, and then we also have this these correlative particles men and de, and we have an extra de here. So these in this particular instance, sometimes the combination of men dead does not emphasize a contrast, but separates one thought from another, or as in a series. And so we could see that here, that the men de is functioning in the manner where it's separating thoughts from one another. And so it does so here, and so we have the thoughts are three here. So he makes a triad here of thoughts with his three verbs, and by his men de here. Here in these particles of correlation. So that's how you're to understand this here, from a diagrammatical point of view. Okay, so I'm just going to provide this slide here. We're not going to spend much time on it, but it's Bauckham goes over Jude's use of hutoi here, these here, and he picks out here that this is used in some of the Pesher exegesis used at Qumran, from the thematic, Pesherim, so titled, that use the term, ze or ele, this one or these here, as it would state it in Hebrew. So we see here that in Jude's Midrashic, in his Midrash here, he's using this same type of exegesis that is found at Qumran. Okay, and it would be remiss here for me not to mention Earl Ellis here. in his important seminal work here on Midrash in the book of Jude. I don't want to go ahead and cover all this because Bauckham basically went through this and refined it somewhat. But this would be very important to read for maybe getting some more background understanding about the use of Midrashic exegesis in the New Testament, and specifically, this is his thoughts on Jude. And this particular side just continues Ellis's use of to support his Midrashic statement. So I wanted to include this particular piece here because he will refer to this, and it would be good to see how he refers to it, because he has indented the text here and is making various points because of it here. So as you would may want to stop and read the previous slide, this here is going to go with it. Okay, then coming here then to this slide here, we'll look diagrammatically here at verse 9, and we'll see here that De is on pedestals here, and it's basically functioning as a conjunction, that's bringing together narrative units. So we'll translate this as now. Now Michael, the archangel. So the term here, archangel, here then is in apposition to Michael. So we use equal signs here then to indicate that, which shows another identification of who Michael is as an archangel. And then we can see here, then we come to this compound sentence here, that we have these two main clauses here, and then we have a temporal clause here with this hata clause, which is temporal in nature. Note here that our main clauses is bifurcated by an adversative alla. So the flow of the text would go this way. Now Michael the archangel, when disputing with the devil, was arguing concerning the body of Moses, did not dare to bring a charge or a judgment of blasphemy, but he said, "The Lord rebuke you." And so when he uses this, this is actually a quotation here taken from Zechariah, "The Lord rebuke you." And this comes here from Zechariah, but not to get ahead of ourselves. We'll look at Zechariah here, but to continue here with our grammatical analysis. In this hati clause, we have our main verb here, which is an imperfect dialego here, and then it's modified here by a temporal use of an adverbial participle, diakrin amenos here, when disputing with the devil. He began to argue about the body of Moses, and then it says he did not dare, and then we have this supplementary use of the of an infinitive here, to bring a charge of blasphemy or a judgment of blasphemy. He didn't dare do that. Michael respected the devil and also the Lord's place to do that in his own time, but he just simply delivered the "May the Lord rebuke you." And so this phrase here, "the Lord rebuke you," is taken from Zechariah, and we can get the text here, and it says that, and he showed me Joshua, the great priest, standing before the angel of Yahweh, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him. And Yahweh said to Satan, "Yahweh rebuke you, O Satan. Yahweh, who has chosen Jerusalem, rebukes you. Is this not a firebrand snatched from the fire. And Joshua was clothed with filthy garments, was standing before the angel, and he answered and said to those standing before him, saying, remove the filthy garments from him. And he said to him, see, I have caused your iniquity to pass from you. And I guess we'll continue with the first person singular, and I will clothe you with a change of garments. And I said, let them put a clean turban upon his head. And they put a clean turban upon his head, and they clothed him with garments. And the angel of Yahweh was standing, and the angel of Yahweh testified to Joshua, saying, thus says Yahweh of hosts, if you walk in my ways, and if you keep my guard, then you shall judge my house, and you shall keep my courts, and I will give to you literally walkings amongst these standing here. So this here, you can see here that the devil here was opposing Joshua, at the time of the building of the second temple, at the end of the exile. When they came back, this is somewhere around the time, it was 515. Here is when I believe the temple was completed, so it was, probably just sometime before that. But anyhow, the devil was disputing here because Joshua's garments were dirty. So there was something here that was, the devil had some type of reason where he could, challenge his, the authority of Joshua to be the high priest. But Yahweh interposed and rebuked Satan here, and so with I guess with Yahweh choosing Jerusalem, he's also going to then choose, the continuation of the covenant through the priesthood of Joshua here, during this time of the reunification of the exiles, at the end of the Babylonian period, beginning here during the underneath Cyrus. So this is where he uses this quote here, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." So Michael then is here is he's using this quote against the devil here, that's taken here, most likely here from Zechariah. So we just we needed to cover that, just to show you some of the diagrammatical analysis of the text as well as the intertextual. Okay, we're getting here close to getting this whole thing wrapped up here. So coming here then to verse 10, we'll look here, and we also have another de here, which is also joining these clauses together here. Now these, and then we have this men de, these particular particles of correlation here, and they're being used with hasa here, which is, it's a further, these are they show clauses of correlation as well, that will assist in separating the thoughts here that are being stated. So it will say, now these in one way blaspheme whatever things they do not know, and in another way things that they understand naturally as brute beasts, by these things they corrupt themselves. So we're looking at this as the use of the middle voice here. So it's separating two thoughts that on the one thing they blaspheme what they don't know, but things that they know naturally as brute beasts, by these things they are corrupting themselves. So it's talking about the Hasa clause here. So they're being corrupted by blaspheming things that they're ignorant of, and then they're being corrupted here by things that they know naturally as brute beasts. So this is referring to their base nature that they operate in, and they have no discernment. So he likens them unto beasts. And if you don't, the next picture here, brace yourself for this, but it's going to show what happens to a church, how it becomes a circus when these types of men take over. Okay, so I really thought that this picture here really, would just exactly states exactly what's going on in some of these circuses. They're certainly not churches. They have become a circus here. And when we look at verse 10 here, now these blaspheme whatever things they do not know, and whatever things they understand naturally as unreasoning animals, by these things they corrupt themselves. So this thing here is definitely corrupting himself here, and this has just become the church of the lesbo homo hedonicans. So if you don't take up the fight, and you don't fight for the faith, and you let these types to take over, it's gonna the church is no longer a church. It's become a circus. Okay, so this has been Biblical Theology, Exegesis, and Hermeneutics, where meaning is always context-driven. Please like, share, and subscribe. And we'll be continuing on in this series as in weeks to come.